All right, Steve. I believe the band is here.
Okay, great. Well, good morning. I'm Steve Strauss with Developmental Associates, and we're looking forward to explaining our process to you all today, and making sure that you're clear about how we would operate if we work with you to hire the next town manager. With me is Joe Durham. Joe, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning to all. Joe Durham with Developmental Associates. Been working with Developmental Associates the past 6+ years, and prior to that was the Deputy County Manager in Wake County for about 14 years. Pleasure to be with you this morning.
So, Mayor, I was thinking that it might be helpful if we gave a little background about our company and then maybe explained our process and answered any questions. Is that how we should proceed?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. I can put our proposal up on the screen, or if everyone has it, I can just refer folks to pages. How should I do that?
They do not.
Mary Beth, you went to mute.
You're muted.
So sorry. I was going to say they do not have it. So if you want, I can pull it up, or if you'd like to pull it up, and I can email it to everyone so you can see it as well.
Oh, okay. I'll let me see if I can do so. I don't think I'll have a problem with this, but let me see. Aha, there we go. Can everybody see that?
Let's see, we'll give it just a second. We're seeing your initials. Here it goes. There you go.
I see it.
Okay, great. Excellent. All right. Well, so let me tell you a little bit about Developmental Associates, and then Joe and I will walk you all through the process and see what kinds of questions or concerns you might have about it. I actually started as a sole proprietor back in 1991. I used to teach at the School of Government and then left there to go to NC State University. I'm sure I'm generating all kinds of reactions, Carolina State, whatever, but and started teaching there in their Masters of Public Administration program. And at that point, I began providing consulting services to local governments. About 13, 14 years ago, we ventured into the area of executive recruitment. And the big reason for that was we saw what a lot of local governments were doing in terms of their hiring processes. They were relying on a lot of, for the most part, on firms outside of North Carolina, conducting what we thought were not very comprehensive processes for positions, and thought we might be able to add some value in that area. So we have been conducting executive search processes since that time. We focused mostly on North Carolina for the first 10 or so years, but recently we've expanded and we're basically now operating in the Southeast. We have several projects going on in the last 2 years in Virginia, Georgia, and we're now starting to do some work in Florida as well. So we are based in Durham, and we are a company that is diverse on a lot of levels. We have predominantly female ownership. We use consultants who are all retired local government executives. The area I always tease that we're not diverse in is we're all old. But other than that, we're diverse. In terms of race, gender, and I think another interesting area is we combine practitioners along with folks that are academics. I used to be an assistant town manager before I got into academia. My partner, Heather Lee, was the VP for Human Resources for Easter Seals. So we have practical backgrounds, but we also spent most of our careers in academia. And then we partner with folks like Joe who have extensive and very successful professional careers. So that's a little bit about us. So let me walk you all through our process, and let me begin with our mission. Our mission is never to try to make any decisions for our clients. That is not our job. Our job is not to decide for you. Our job is to provide you with the best information to make your decisions. As a result, our process is different from what a traditional search firm does in several key respects. And I think you'll hear that as I walk you through the process. So again, with our scope of work, the first step that we always kick things off with is a job and organizational analysis. What we try to do is get a good feel not only for what you're looking for in a manager, but what the key issues are organizationally. What are the key challenges that the town of Apex is facing? I'm fairly familiar with that since we've done some work with the town over the last couple of years. But want to hear it from the horse's mouth, from the council, in terms of what you all see as the key issues facing the organization that the next manager is going to be addressing. We would also want to get input certainly from the outgoing manager and also from department directors. You may want us to get input for some other folks. You all may be aware that we've conducted some fairly extensive community sessions for the chief of police position. Don't know how councils really vary in terms of how much input they want for a manager position from the community. We can do that in terms of group sessions, public sessions, also community surveys as well. So we would want to work that out with you in terms of whom you'd want us to get input from. So that's step one. Step two is based on that information, we would put together a candidate profile and a job ad so that we could begin our recruitment. We would send that back to the council for your review and make sure that it's worded in a way that you're comfortable with. I also want to show you an example. I'm going to pull up a different document here real quickly and show you an example of what we call our electronic brochure that we use for recruitment. Can you all see this? It should say the town of Chapel Hill. That's yes. On your screen now. Okay. So as you can see, we really believe in having a very attractive brochure that we can that candidates can come and look at on our website. Also that we and I'll turn this over to Joe in just a minute, that he can use for recruiting candidates. As you can see, we like to explain a little bit of about the position, about the community, some information on the sidebars about, for example, some demographics of the community, all of which obviously would sell, help Apex will sell well, given what a fabulous community you are and the national recognition that Apex has had. And so then we give some information about the community. The town of Chapel Hill here wanted to share some of their values as well. And then we get into the position, what the top priorities are, basic information about employees, departments, budget, qualifications for the position, some statements about that we learned again from these job analysis sessions about what a successful candidate needs to bring to the table. And then the nuts and bolts, salary and benefits, application process, and so forth. So this is all something that we would want to generate to use for our recruitment process. Then once we have an agreement with you all about, hold on just a minute, about the job ad, we would then begin our recruitment process. And pull that up again. So let me turn it over to Joe at this point and let him talk about his recruitment efforts. And I may have some things to add to that after Joe finishes. So step 3. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. As you can see, this is a multi-method recruitment process. And one of the, you see the key pieces there is conducting the targeted recruitment of leading candidates. And we believe that by we've got a database of thousands of local government executives across the country, and sending out mass emails to those executives, ones who we think would be of particular interest in the job in Apex. It also includes posting in those key professional websites, making sure that's there. There are listservs, which we find to be very important in getting the word out about the position. And let me reiterate a point that Steve made earlier. I think it's important to know you have a good product to sell. So we envision that there will be many people applying for the job. It's a great job in a great community, growing community, and that will ensure that we get a good base of good, qualified, experienced applicants. And we're also posting on social media. Of course, that's out there now. That's something we take advantage of. And posting on NeoGov. NeoGov is one of our largest sources of government jobs in the nation, and we think that that's also important. I want to go back. There are a lot of executives that are out there, or a lot of managers or assistant managers who may not necessarily apply on their own. They may not know about the job. So those direct contacts to them via direct phone calls, which I have done, will continue to do, emails, following up with the emails, and again, trying to get people interested in the job. And again, qualified people, experienced people, people who we believe would do a good job for this town of Apex. So again, our goal is to develop a diverse pool of qualified applicants that will meet the expectations for you.
Thank you, Joe. You've covered everything I can think of. And we would recruit for about 30 days. And then we would send you information 2 or 3 days ahead of a screening meeting that we would hold with you all. This would be a closed session because there's personnel matters, and you actually would be discussing candidate names and so forth. What we do during that first screen is we will have gone through all of your applications. We would have assessed them in terms of how their strength of fit with what the town is looking for. You would have access to every single application, every single resume, every single cover letter. In addition, we would provide you with a spreadsheet that lists out all the candidates and the data we have on each one. We would also do a Google search at that point on all the candidates and provide you with a summary of what we learned in our Google searches, but also links to the articles so you could actually read them firsthand yourselves and not necessarily just take our word for it. We would then, during our meeting with you all, which usually takes about an hour and a half, ask you to reduce the number of candidates down to no more than 15. Those folks would then be invited to go through a secondary screening process. Joe would be the lead person on that, conducting video interviews with each of the candidates. And this usually takes us 10 days to 2 weeks to conduct this secondary screening process. So, Joe, you want to talk about that as well?
Yes, thanks, Steve. And this is the first time that we have direct contact with more of a structured contact with the applicants. And this is a interview that takes about an hour. It includes 5 scored questions. And these questions are based upon, again, issues, concerns, or skill sets you would like to see in a new manager. We're going to glean a lot of that by going through this process, meeting with you when we conduct the job analysis. So these are pertinent and relevant questions that we will ask them. And Again, these are cold questions. There's no prep that they have beforehand, so I'm asking them those questions. And again, it'll be up to 15 applicants that I would interview, max of that. And again, 5 scored questions, and I'll be presenting those outcomes to you. The second part of that also includes electronic survey questions. And again, these are also this is a multifaceted approach by giving them the opportunity to respond electronically. Again, this is not scored. The interview process is scored, but the the electronic survey questions are not. So this is another opportunity for them. We can observe their writing skills. They can talk in more detail about some of those issues. So this is another part of that process. But again, you'll get detailed information on their responses, and this is a critical part of that recruitment process. Thank you.
And just to add one thing to what Joe said, we would have Joe would conduct the interviews, but he would not see the results of our scoring on the survey questions, because we believe in having independent perspectives on each method that we use. Because one of the things that happens for employers is once you start getting a read on a candidate, say, for example, if you interview the candidate and you start having a positive impression about them, it's going to have a tendency to bleed over into how you look at their results in terms of their answers to essay questions. So we want to have independent perspectives. By the way, one of the things that Joe does so well during these interviews, during the initial screen, you're going to be raising questions, why did this candidate leave this position? Why do they want to come to Apex? Those kinds of things. And any questions that you have about a candidate during your initial screen, Joe will ask about that to get firsthand information from the candidates, again, to feed back to you during the second screening meeting. At the end of the second screening meeting, we would ask you all to reduce the number of candidates down to your top 5. Those folks would then go through a unique process called an assessment center. And let me explain a little bit about that. It's described for you here at step 5. It's step 6, 7, and 8. So obviously, what typically happens with most search firms is what we would call an over-reliance on interviews. The candidate goes through a screening interview. They then come on site. They might have 2 or 3 interviews at that point to be in their assessment. If you think about the information that you have to evaluate a candidate for such a critical position, what you have to look at is their resume or cover letter, so you know what they've done, and their application, so you know what they've done during their careers, but you don't know how well they've done it. You can also refer to references, and what do you learn from references? Well, sometimes references, the folks supplying the references aren't necessarily that open or candid about what they know about a candidate. So that gives you some questionable information as well about their competency. So we rely very much on an interview. Well, again, we believe in interviews, and we think that's an important step in the process, but we also don't believe in over-relying on interviews. And so, and here's the reasoning for that. The interview is an assessment tool, and like any tool, it has certain things it can do for you and certain things it can't do for you. And there's the strength of an interview is it enables you to view candidate oral communication skills. It enables you to find out what they know. So, for example, you can find out what they know about budgeting, about planning, about HR management, and so forth. And it also enables you to assess their judgment. A best practice in interviews is to use what are called behaviorally based questions, which are situational. So, for example, you can have a question. You have a department director who reports to you as manager. Their performance isn't what it needs to be, da-da-da-da-da. How'd you go about dealing with him or her to resolve that issue? Now, when they answer that question, what have you learned? Their judgment, their oral communication skills, and their knowledge about how to manage performance. But there are a whole lot of critical competencies that you still can only guess about, and that's what most of us do at the end of an interview. Just for example, you may say, well, what we need is a real team leader for our manager, who holds staff accountable. Great. We would think those would be great competencies, but you cannot assess those in an interview. All you know is what the candidate would say about those kinds of leadership skills. You don't see them because the interview is not conducive to that. They may tell you about their excellent background in budgeting and their experience in background, but and their experience with budgeting. But do you know that they can actually analyze a budget and make an effective presentation? Can only guess about that after an interview. You certainly don't know if they can put together a plan of action. You certainly don't know how well they could run a meeting, either with the public or with their staff. So what we do is we just use this assessment center process, which the basic idea behind it is you design exercises that simulate what the manager would have to do in their job, and you set up exercises that simulate those. So, for example, one of the key competencies of a manager might be to do an analysis of the budget. Maybe there's some critical, and again, we would find this out during these initial focus groups. What are the key budgetary challenges facing the town of Apex? Well, we would actually take one of those, actually give the candidates the town budget, and have them do an analysis and then a presentation in an exercise where they're demonstrating actually their ability to analyze and make a presentation. That scenario where we heard them say what they would do in an interview with regard to how they might deal with the performance of a department director, we would actually have a coaching role play exercise where they actually have to sit down with someone acting as that department director and work through those issues. We would have them put together some sort of a plan of action with regard to some key town initiative in writing. And we might have them do something like run a staff meeting around some key organizational issues and see how they would address those. So these exercises then allow us to learn new things about the candidate that we could not know in the interview. The research on interviews shows that at best, and this is a little bit depressing, you can learn about 30% of their competencies to carry out an executive position. When you add these other exercises, if you think about it, every exercise allows you to see some different competencies. And as you add those up, you begin to get about 65% accuracy, 65 with respect to their ability to do the job. So it's not perfect by any means, but it's twice as accurate as a traditional interview. We would also, just to talk about the process a little bit more, we typically do this over a 2-day time period. We would recruit assessors, again, based upon whom, as you see here at step 7, based upon whom you would approve. We typically like to get a combination of folks to evaluate the exercises, usually 3 to 4 team members per exercise. Those typically involve other local government managers who we would call subject matter experts because they do this kind of work. The other thing that's nice about it is they know what's involved in terms of being an effective town manager, but they don't necessarily have a stake in terms of who gets the position. We can also involve some community members if you'd like for us to do that. If so, we'd like to have maybe 1, possibly 2 per exercise, mesh them with these subject matter experts. We train them on the first day of the process. We train them that morning in terms of how to carry out the process. We believe in a completely objective, behaviorally based approach to rating. So they do not give you opinions, they give you factual information. After they've been trained, they then evaluate, again, those up to 5 candidates over the afternoon of the first day and throughout the early afternoon of the second day. And then what we do is we have a debrief with you all, again, a closed session on the afternoon of the second day. And each of these assessor teams then come and meet with you and provide you with firsthand feedback on each of the candidates. Answer any questions that you might have as well. And usually what we, and by the way, there's one other thing that we would do. We would have all the candidates take the emotional intelligence inventory, which is described for you here on page 10. And it includes these factors that you see here on this page. Now, now, again, keep in mind when you're evaluating candidates using this assessment center process, some of the competencies you're looking for are purely technical. A budget presentation exercise, ability to analyze a budget, to make a presentation, and so forth. That is almost purely a technical exercise. A coaching role play where they're dealing with a staff member is almost totally an emotional intelligence exercise. So we would have combinations of the two. For any job, you've got to have technical competency. You have to have emotional intelligence competency. But with respect to emotional intelligence, we would also have the candidates take this validated instrument. It's validated for employment purposes. And we would also have the results on this. And as you can see here, if you were interviewing the candidate, these are all factors you would be trying to understand about that with respect to each candidate. For example, emotional self-awareness, how in touch are they with their own emotions, how interested are they in their own professional development, do they have self-confidence or self-regard, are they motivated to achieve at a high level in their job, do they have self-actualization, can they think and act independently, can they resolve conflicts in a constructive way with other folks, assertiveness, are they accessible to others? Are they someone who engages through interpersonal relations? Are they someone who can understand other people's situation and show some concern for that? Are they a team player or mission-driven, social responsibility? When it comes to decision making, do they get all the data before they rush to a decision? Do they demonstrate impulse control? Do they see situations objectively? Do they systematically work through problems? And then last of all, with regard to stress management, can they adapt to challenging circumstances? Do they tolerate stress okay? And do they have a can-do attitude, which is very important for stress management or optimism? So as we are conducting our debrief with you all, we would be making note of how the candidates perform with respect to the emotional intelligence factors. And after all the assessors have left, we would then share the results with you of the emotional intelligence inventory and cross-validate what the assessors have told you about skills like conflict resolution with what we see in the instrument. That way, again, we move the accuracy of the process up another 10 to 15%. So now we're talking about 75 to 80% accuracy, and it improves the depth of the information that you all have. Again, all intended to try to provide you with the best information to make your decisions. So at the end of that process, we have found 2 or 3 interesting patterns. One of those is the council's all in on a particular candidate. Again, this doesn't happen very often, but we have had in the triangle one council that was they were so impressed with one particular candidate who came out of their process, they immediately began negotiating with that person and hired her as their manager. More normally, what we have is councils have 2 or 3 top candidates that come out of the process, and you want to interview those final 2 or 3 folks, obviously. If we can be any help to you with your final interviews in terms of helping coordinate, in terms of helping you with some questions that are particularly relevant to what we learned out of this very intensive process, we're glad to share some of those with you as well. And then once you've narrowed it down to your top candidate, if you'd like, we can connect you with a background investigator to conduct that, or you can use the town resources for that background investigation. It's really up to you. And then once you've hired this person, we would work with you. We would provide the opportunity for that candidate to get executive coaching from us. Our view is we want any candidate that comes out of a process that we're part of to be successful. We want them to hit the ground running. We've learned a tremendous amount about them based on their performance in the assessment center exercises, as well as the emotional intelligence testing. And so we would give them very honest and frank feedback, but also work with them to put together plans for how they, again, might be most successful when they become the Apex Town Manager. One other point, and then I'll shut up, which is, it wouldn't surprise me at all if you had some internal candidates. They can go through the process just like everybody else. If they get the position, fine. If they don't get the position, we can also provide coaching for them because they've put a tremendous amount of effort into the process. The other thing about internal candidates is, they can go through the assessment center and get the objective assessment just like anybody else. And we have found in the past that really gives certain candidates an opportunity, not only for their professional development, but to establish their identity with the council, because you may have a feel for how they do on the job, but this gives you much more data about how they might perform as manager. So I will stop sharing at this particular point and go into our questions and answers. What questions do you all have for Joe and I?
So you all just want us to jump on in?
Please do.
Oh, sorry. Terry raised his hand like he's supposed to. I can wait. Go ahead, Mr. Happy.
Thank you, Dr. Strauss, for joining us here, and thanks again for partnering with us for the search. I know your firm has done a lot of work with Apex in the past, so we appreciate having you on board here. My question kind of pertains to the environment one with COVID and how that may be affecting the applicant pool and this process. To be honest, I mean, I'm a little concerned just given what I'm seeing around, and may kind of depress the interest. People might not want to move around. Can you, given your experience over the past year, can you speak at all to how that's affected the applicant pool and how that may affect the number of applicants we get and that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a great, obviously very relevant question. I tell you what we have found. We have not necessarily seen a decrease in the level of interest. Clearly, it's going to affect some people in terms of their interest. But what we have found instead is actually the pace at which candidates take other positions has increased. And so, for example, we really do not, once we get through that initial screen with our clients, we really encourage our clients to move pretty quickly to the secondary screen and then into the assessment center process, because during that time, a lot of candidates are getting swooped up by other employers. So what we've seen is actually quicker decision making on the part of employers. And so it's not at all unusual for us to lose a candidate or two the last week or two of our process. In terms of the numbers and quality of candidates, not really seeing much of an impact on that at this particular juncture.
This is Nicole Dozier. Just had a few reactions to a couple of steps.
Yes, ma'am.
Related to, so thank you so much for your presentation. So for step one, I think you mentioned public input. I just wanted to react. I think that's great. So I'm interested in hearing more later about, the best way to do that. I know there's different options that you laid out. Then skipping down to, you mentioned like in step 6 is cultural competency. So along with that, I just thought, how would you determine, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the cultural competency piece, but I heard emotional intelligence. So can you talk a little bit more about cultural competency, equity lens, the COVID-19 crisis management lens, leadership style there?
I want to make sure I'm answering the actual question you have. When you say cultural competency, can you clarify for me how you mean that?
Sure. So I guess what I would think about is similar to emotional intelligence is the way the person leads related to people of different cultures, different backgrounds, different thoughts, perspectives,
Gotcha.
different ways of communicating, has a disability, on and on.
Gotcha. Great. Yeah. Well, a couple of things. One is when we would conduct the job analysis with you all, if you put a lot of emphasis, if we hear that's a very important emphasis, and apparently we would from you all, we would make sure that we build that into the process, and that could show up in several different ways. One is it could be a significant part of our screening, secondary screening through either interview questions and/or survey questions. The neat thing about our assessment center process for the top 5 candidates is we can design exercises, and we have done so many, many times, where they actually have to demonstrate cultural competency in terms of actually dealing with people, not talking about how they would deal with people, but actually having to deal with people. So, for example, in meetings, in coaching role plays, we always recruit a diverse set of assessors so they actually will be dealing with diversity in the exercises themselves. And last of all, when we look at their results on emotional intelligence, you find out a lot about their attitudes and their approach with regard to inclusion. Also, when you look at these different factors and how they perform on those, so that we'd actually have 3 different sets of data points on the cultural competency. Did that answer your question? Okay. And Joe, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that as well.
No, those are things that will come out as part of this process. You'll be able to see those, and again, when we conduct the job analysis, that will also be a factor there that we could include in there. So yeah, as part of this process, that will come out loud and clear.
Okay, and the other part of that was sort of the crisis management, COVID-19. So we do the same thing to get at that. Okay. Then I guess the next reaction for me was related to that was I appreciate the simulation exercises. And I think another piece would be internal and external communications approaches, especially in this moment of, lack of in-person, digital, virtual. I think that needs to be addressed in a different way in this moment. So I don't need an answer for that, but that's just a reaction from me. And then step 7, you answered about the assessors. I just wondered, how do you get the assessor profile to determine if you have a diverse pool?
Well, we know the folks out there well enough that we know we always emphasize diversity, and we know managers in the region that we can bring into a process like this. And so, it's not like we're guessing. We know the folks that we're recruiting, and we make sure that we have diversity. The other thing that I would just add too is since March of last year, we've been running these processes virtually, obviously, and that has provided some unexpected benefits to us. I will just tell you, we ran a process about 2 weeks ago where we had assessors from Yale University in Connecticut, as well as an assessor from Georgia. So we had folks all the way up and down the Eastern Seaboard. And nobody has to travel. There are no expenses. It's very easy to do that. And so it's actually expanded our ability to be diverse with our assessors.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Brett Gant. So I was wondering, throughout this process, you kind of you went to the end where you kind of said, I guess, potential hire, or talk to the town council and make the hire. How do you guys track success after that? And how does any success or failures, such as like a manager not lasting very long in a community, how does that go back into the process to improve it?
Yeah, our success rate is really strong. We've had, I need to go back through and do a head count and so forth, but Let me just say a couple things with regard to that. One is because we focus primarily or almost totally on North Carolina for the first 10 years or so of our executive search processes, we had a little bit of a dilemma, because if we were involved with a hiring process that did not turn out well, everybody would know it that we work with. Unlike a national firm, where if they screw up a hire in Oregon, nobody knows about it in North Carolina, right? So we have to live with the results of our efforts. The other benefit of that, though, is we're in touch with all these folks and we know how they're doing. We have had a couple of hires that did not work out well. That's it, just a couple. And I will just tell you, in both those cases, the council went against the results that we had. And fortunately, for as far as I could tell, for racial reasons. In one case, the council was not going to consider a very effective African-American candidate who's now a manager elsewhere in the state and doing great. They wouldn't consider him. We had a reverse situation occur also 2 or 3 years ago, where council would not consider a white candidate and wanted to go with an African-American candidate who did not perform as well in the process. So we've had it go both ways. And in both cases, it didn't work out as well. But I think as long as the council takes into account the data we provide, we don't try to push you in terms of whom you hire, but as long as you're looking at the data in a realistic way, very typically that does give you 2 or 3 good options. And as long as you're going along with that information and then making your own decision, we haven't had any problems with that at all. So that's been our experience. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Yes.
Hi,
Okay.
this is Cheryl. Brett, was that all? Did you get your question answered? Okay. Thank you all for your presentation this morning. And a question in terms of timelines. It looked like on your information you provided maybe 70, 80, 90 days. Would you estimate how long you think this process might take?
Yes, ma'am. From the date that we have the job ad ready to go with you all, and again, we would have to work out how you'd want to structure the input for that. And but what we typically we can get a job ad to you pretty quickly after we finished our input sessions. And from that date forward, it takes about 30 days for recruitment. And then about 30 days to get through the first screen, the secondary screen, and run the assessment center. So roughly at about 60, 65 days, you should know who your top 2 or 3 candidates are. Given what I told you all a little bit earlier about COVID, one of the things that we would want to do with you all is have you go ahead and commit to 2 or 3 days after the assessment center for interviews with your top 2 or 3 folks. And I know all of you are busy to do that, early on in the process. We'd ask you to go ahead and lay out those days so that once the assessment center is done, so, let's just throw out a date, on April 1st, I don't even know what day that is. Let's suppose it's Friday. We would be able to notify your top 2 or 3 candidates. You could set up and have interviews with them the next week. You could be ready to make your decision within 10 days or so after the assessment center. The background investigation always does take a couple of weeks for a high level position like this. So, but I would think you could have finalized your offer, have a commitment from a manager within 3 months after we would kick off the process. Now, they may have to give 30 days notice if they're from somewhere else. So it may be 4 months before you'd have them on the job, but roughly about 3 months, you should have sealed your decision. And then it's a matter of what it would, how long they would need before they would start with the town.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions? Okay. Mayor, I don't know what else you would like from us at this particular juncture.
Well, I just want to thank you for providing this comprehensive overview. of the process. I will say, I don't have any questions, but you guys have always done a fantastic job for the town of Apex in my time with the police department. So I just want to recognize that and appreciate all the work you do. So I look forward to the process.
Thank you. Thank you. If you'd like to work with us, I think the next step would be to set up a session with you all and get your input on the position, get your input on how you'd want us to structure the rest of the input sessions, and set dates. We believe in right off the bat, let's set dates for everything. Go ahead and have a plan. And that way, you know, from day one, what you can expect at each step along the way and when to expect it.
With the candidate profile, I do have one question. Can you explain the difference in doing a group candidate profile when you build that versus one-on-one sessions and the advantages of either way? Can you explain that?
Yes, sir. We actually prefer the group sessions. The reason for that is we like to use kind of a focus group process. When folks are speaking and others hear, it tends to build more depth in terms of the information that we get. They tend to be richer discussions than if we do it one-on-one. We have on occasion, we're totally open to doing the one-on-one interviews as well. Again, we don't typically get quite as much depth, but sometimes there are logistical reasons for doing it one-on-one. You know, for example, we have worked with councils that just, you know, preferred not to do it as a group and wanted to do it either individually or in pairs. There are certain folks that we would talk with one-on-one, you know, such as the outgoing manager. We'd want to get his perspective as well. But our preference is definitely to do the group sessions. And frankly, we get a lot of positive feedback about that, because the questions we ask, particularly the one where we have a discussion about what you see as the major challenges facing the town, folks usually come away from that feeling pretty enthused about the opportunity to think big picture, longer term, hear from one another. And we get a lot of positive feedback about how enjoyable it is to have that discussion and how thought-provoking it is for everyone's jobs.
Steve, the mayor and I spoke earlier, and I know he had run it by the council that we were wanting to work with developmental associates. So I know that this group is very busy and hard to get their time together sometimes. So we did schedule this for another half hour. So if you wanted to go ahead and get some things done, I do believe the consensus from the group was to move forward with developmental associates. If anyone's had a change of heart, please speak up. But I think we were on that page and ready to talk through some of the questions that you might have for them and what they're looking for, or at the very least, maybe, again, while you've got them all together, set some dates.
Well, that was my hope, but I certainly want to make sure you all are comfortable before we proceed.
That was my understanding. Does any council members object or oppose to moving forward?
No objection.
Okay. All right.
Great.
Proceed.
Okay. Well, let's get to work then. So I'm going to pull the document up again, and I'm going to take notes on it as we speak. If I can just remember how I got the document up to start with. I don't see the, oh, here we go. Okay, here we go. All right, let me try once more. Okay. So let's talk about I'm completely comfortable getting input from you all this morning about the position, if you all have time to do so. I hear, though, that we'd like to make sure that we get everything set up in terms of schedule and so forth. So let me begin by asking this question, and you'll see me doing some editing as we speak. what are your what we would normally propose is we would meet with you all. Maybe we can even do that this morning. Get your input on what you see as the key challenges facing the town and the next manager. And then, and what I'm proposing is let's set the dates and so forth. And then if you all have time, we'll come back and do that. We would also then normally work with Mary Beth to set up a session with the department directors, which we again could do through a virtual session. Don't know if you all have any thoughts about other folks, other stakeholders you'd like for us to get involved, including the public. And also, by the way, I think it'd be great if we could have a one-on-one session, if it's okay with you all, if we had a one-on-one session with the outgoing manager also. So beyond having a session with the council, beyond having a focus group with department directors, beyond having a one-on-one interview with the manager, any other input you'd like for us to get?
Don't have anything to add.
Yeah. I mean, this is Nicole. I think that some of I didn't know how deep you wanted us to go in the question and answer portion, but when I mentioned things like, the public health and economic crisis. So for, our constituency, that includes community members and especially business owners. I also think just related to that, and just as the town grows too, internal and external messaging and communications.
So you're sharing what you see as key challenges facing the manager. Is that correct, ma'am?
Yeah, not kind of big picture of growth and all those, but just
some
of the things. Yeah.
I would propose we come back and have that discussion about those challenges. Right now, my question, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
Okay.
My question is, do you want us to seek input from other stakeholders beyond the council, department directors, and the manager?
For me, that would be yes, but other people weigh in. Thank you for the clarification.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I wasn't clear. And and we can get that in. If you do want us to get input from other folks, we can set up focus group sessions with groups you want us to reach out to. We can have a public meeting if you'd like for us to do that. We can also send out surveys or any of the above or all of the above, whatever you'd like for us to do.
I actually had a question about this. I know Councilman Dozier mentioned the public, and you mentioned the public a couple times. So what is mostly the data you're trying to get from when you've done the public feedback about this is challenges facing the town, and not necessarily what I'm guessing what kind of manager they're looking for is not really as relevant as challenges facing the town, right?
We actually asked both questions. Frankly, we get more mileage out of the challenges facing the town than we do out of the competencies. We could probably tell you 9 out of 10 competencies you're going to tell us right off the bat, or the public would tell us, but we get a lot more depth and richness by asking about those challenges. And we typically can figure out what the competencies are based on the challenges, so for example, if you tell us, if we hear that, for example, that there's major infrastructure issues facing the town and so on and so forth, then we obviously need somebody who's got the budgeting and the analytical skills in order to be able to do that, just as an example. But we do ask both questions.
If it helps, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Mahaffey.
Sorry, I was just going to chime in on the initial question of other stakeholders to reach out to, and I think there's really two different sets of people that we should reach out to. I would like to see some public inclusion in the process, whether it's just a survey followed up by a a brief public meeting or something like that. Also, I think reaching out to the business community, there's at least two major organizations in town, the Chamber and the ADBA, who we should reach out to and see what their thoughts are on the town manager position to make sure they're included. So that's my feedback. I don't want to delay the process too much by having a 30-day or 2-month reach out period, but definitely somehow finding a way to include these stakeholders in the process, I think will yield some good results.
The other group you mentioned besides the Chamber was who?
The ADBA, which is the Apex Downtown Business Association.
Okay, sure.
Sort of like the Chamber specifically for our downtown businesses.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me interject if I can. Those are the two groups that we normally do. Are there other groups that you would like to see us engage outside of that business community?
This is Nicole Dozier. I would like to see us engage like the Western Red Crisis Ministry or the faith community, the community that wraps itself around our citizens for their faith or for other needs that they may have.
Okay. Thank you.
We were in touch with several faith community groups during the focus groups for police chief, and my assumption is some of those same groups you'd want us to reach out to for this position as well, which we'd be glad to do.
And I think Mary Beth, I had provided you some names and contacts as well on that side.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other groups you'd like for us to reach out to? Okay.
This is Cheryl. Possibly our folks in our schools, and I mentioned that also with our police chief, they could weigh in well on some challenges that we're facing as a community. So if it's possible to consider our school leadership.
Okay.
Let me, if I can clarify that, which the actual local schools, or you're looking at is it county leadership?
Possibly our school board representative, but more specifically, I was thinking about our local schools, like our principals and guidance counselors.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to chip in?
This is Nicole. I'm sorry, I was on mute. Related to that, I wanted to not leave out young people. And so I'm not sure the best way to do that, but maybe the school board rep, not the elected, sure, that would be wonderful, but just like the community member that works hand in hand on those to represent parents, if there was someone to represent, the student body in some way. I don't know how to do that. So.
Okay. All right. Now, okay. This is good. Let me just ask you this key question, because we're going to need it in terms of setting dates. We can reach out to all these folks. It will take us at least, I would guess, 2 weeks to reach out to these other folks and get their input. A, to get it scheduled, B, to get the input. There's a couple ways you can think about getting their input. One is we can wait and put together the job ad after we've gotten their input. The other opportunity is we could tighten the timeline a bit by getting input from the board and getting input from the staff and the outgoing manager, all of which I would think, if we can pull off the session with you all today, we could do within the next week, and then we could have a job ad to you by the 1st of next week and go ahead and get the process going. Meanwhile, we can be getting input from these other groups that can help us with the screening and design of the assessment center process. Or we can add on those couple of extra weeks and go ahead and just not start the process till late in February of beginning our recruitment. So do you have a preference either way? And again, let me make sure I'm being clear. One, we can get input from all the folks associated directly with the town, get that done, I would think, with Mary Beth's help this week or by the very first of next week, and then go ahead and get a job ad to you early next week for your review and go ahead and get the whole process started before the end of next week. Or again, it'll add a couple of weeks for us and then meanwhile continue to get input from these other folks. Or we can just wait till later, get the input from all these groups, wait till later in February to kick off the process.
Mayor Pro Tem.
My pleasure would be to do both and. Mr. Gant, are you confused by that?
I am.
I don't think it's possible to do both. I think it's one or the other. It's about timing. I don't think it's possible to do both.
Well, I'll see if the professionals can understand what I'm suggesting.
Well, to me, both and is let's get input from everybody, but move forward within the next week with the go ahead and putting together the job ad. To me, that's the only way to do both.
You threw out two scenarios that you could accomplish, and so I was picking one of them you threw out there.
Well, I'm not sure which one you picked. So one is get input directly from folks that are more directly involved with this, the department directors, the council, outgoing manager, and go ahead and post the ad, meanwhile getting input from the other groups.
Exactly.
Okay, that's what you're supporting. Okay, great. Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
I concur. I think that's the way to go.
I support that as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, same here.
Okay. All right, good. Well then, let me ask Mary Beth real quickly. Do you have any sense of how quickly we could have a session with department directors, Mary Beth?
It's possible that we could do it at our weekly director meeting this upcoming Wednesday. I'll need to talk with Drew and just make sure there's time, but let's plan for that.
Okay.
Because we've already got that time locked in with that group.
Okay. Well, here's what we can do then. Let's plan on having the job ad to you. And again, we will work with Mary Beth to get input from all these other groups, but we can have a job ad to you by February the 8th and for your review. And Mayor, what would be a fair amount of time for the council to have to get give us feedback on that? What we would do is send it to all the council members. Each one of you all can weigh in, give us feedback, and then we would finalize the ad based on that input. And we could have it to you by next Monday.
I will wait and hear from my colleagues. I'm flexible. I'm a retired guy, so I'll let them weigh in.
I would just tell you our usual experience is that can be turned around in about 48 hours. But again, I don't want to presume.
Okay. How does your schedule look, guys, for this week? Can we get it done?
Yeah.
What week are we talking about?
Ms. Killingsworth, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's all right. So if we get it on Monday of next week, I'm pretty good with it, as long as I know we're getting it turnaround time within 24 hours or so.
Okay.
And this is Cheryl. I would say within 48 hours on my end, I could turn it around if I have it on my calendar.
Okay. Any objections to 48 hours from anyone, council? All right, sounds good.
Okay, good. So I'm going to hopefully under promise and over deliver. So by February the 12th, we should have the ad. We should be posting the job ad and begin our recruitment efforts. Okay, and then we would recruit through, let's see. What we could do is recruit through March 15, and then we could schedule a session with you all. The earliest per date would probably be March 17 to have a initial screening session with you all. That March 17 would probably be the earliest for us to complete the recruitment and give you all at least 48 hours or so to look through the applications, the information we sent you. And again, we will have all that analyzed, so I think you'll find it's pretty easy for you to review all that.
Okay. Let's go for it.
So do you want to set a date that week? Again, I think the earliest we could do it would be Wednesday the 17th. We can go ahead and set a day and time if you'd like.
Let's set it.
This is Cheryl. I just have a question. I may be out of town that week, so can you tell me what the time commitment would be if we did it that week?
Yes, ma'am. It would be our normal experience. Again, every council is different, but an hour and a half. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, we would do it virtually too. So.
All right.
17th is St. Patrick's Day. You all may have plans for marching or parading or something like that. Just teasing. But
I don't think I would be available on the 17th, but I would be available on the 18th.
That's fine.
Okay. How about 18, Doc? Works for me.
I can
Okay.
make that work.
Okay.
All right. What time would you like to do that?
$10 a.m.
Okay.
Is that too early for anyone? Okay.
10 works for me.
Okay.
You said March 18th, not February, right?
I'm sorry. It is March
Sure,
18th. Thank you.
got the date right.
Thanks for catching that. Yeah, March 18th. All right, good. Then we could meet with you. We would need probably through the 28th to do our screening of those top 15 candidates. We could have the information to you on March 29th. So around the 31st or so would work for us to have your second screening meeting. So 31st or later would be work for us. 31st is a Wednesday.
Okay, great.
Do we need to lock in a time on the 31st at this point?
That would be our preference, so everybody knows what to plan on. But if you would prefer not to lock in a time, you know, as long as we know the day. Yeah.
I think it's good to go ahead and lock it in if we could. Do we want to stick with 10 a.m. as well?
Sure.
I can't do 10 either on that
I
one.
can't do
Or not
10.
either, but
Okay.
I can go earlier though.
All right. Why don't you two set the time then? Yeah.
So I'm unavailable from 10 to 11. I could do before or after.
I mean, I can do as early as 8.
Councilman Gant, what do you got?
I could do,
That's fine with me. 8 to 8. 8's fine.
I
Okay.
could do 8 on the 31st.
Okay.
8 o'clock, 31st.
All right. That's great. That works out well for our timing.
To
Then
be clear, would these be, I'm sorry, would these be
Go ahead.
closed session where we're actually going through applicants and resumes and stuff?
Yeah, all of our work with you after today's meeting would all be closed sessions because we're going to have candidate names out there.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, great. So then we could, let me just check our calendar here. If you all could hold on just a second. I need to talk with my partner just 1 second about schedule.
While he's stepping away, I'll just let you know I'm jotting these down too, and I'm guessing he'll probably resend this proposal to us. So I'll work with IT to get these on the calendar for all of you.
Okay, thank you, Mary Beth.
Sure.
I have a question, everyone. For the 18th, is it possible to bump it up to 9 o'clock with your schedules?
I'm good with it.
I'm good.
All right.
I am.
How about Councilmember Killingsworth?
9 work.
Okay. If you don't mind, I think I'd like to bump it up to 9 if we could.
Okay. So 9 on the 18th. Okay.
Yes,
Good.
thank you.
All right. Unfortunately, we always run our processes for managers on Thursdays and Fridays. The reason for that is candidates are likely in managerial roles with other organizations. They very often have board meetings Monday, Tuesdays, or Wednesdays, and assessors are likely managers, and they also have commitments typically earlier in the week. So unfortunately, we are already committed on the 15th and 16th. So we would have to do the 22nd and 23rd of April. I don't know if that works for you all, but we could definitely do it those 2 days to run the assessment process. Now, your involvement, we would love to have the mayor meet the assessors on the morning of the first day, just, sort of a welcome, and meet the assessors, say a little bit about the town, and that's about it. And then, but on the second day, which I'm proposing to be Friday the 23rd, we would go into an executive session with you all about 2:30 that afternoon, share with you our the results, and then orchestrate and facilitate your meeting with each assessor team for about half an hour the rest of that afternoon, and culminating in your deciding whom you want to invite in for your final interviews. So would that work for you all to do the 22nd and 23rd? And again, your time commitment would be on the afternoon of the 23rd.
Mayor, on my calendar, I had penciled in our budget workshop on the 22nd. I think that was from an early email last year about our calendar for our budget process. Is that something that we would have to move, or is that I don't know how
I don't think it would affect you on the 22nd at all. It's just the 23rd that that afternoon, starting at 2:30, that you'd have to be involved.
That works for me.
Yeah, that works for me. Yeah.
Okay. So April 23rd, beginning at 2:30. Okay for everybody? And that would be the rest of the afternoon, and maybe even until about 5:30, to process all that information and make your decision. Sounds like that works for everybody?
Works for me.
Yep,
Okay.
that works.
And we don't need to do this now, but we would, if you want to, that's fine. We would encourage you all to set aside 2 or 3 days the next week for interviewing your top 2 or 3 candidates. Let's assume you'd have 3 candidates. And we normally suggest you set aside a half day for each candidate. So, you know, you could conceivably set aside 1 day where you could possibly see 2 candidates, morning and afternoon. Or you could simply set aside 3 days that next week. And again, you would know on the 23rd whether you'd fill them all or not. Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to just, are you too depressed about getting all your schedules all locked in and you want to wait? But, or if you want to do that now, that's perfectly fine with us if you'd like to spend a couple minutes doing that.
I would like to go ahead and get it done now if we can.
Okay.
Mayor, this is Audra. If it's going to be a full day, it would have to be a Tuesday or a Thursday for me.
Okay.
We do have a town council meeting that Tuesday.
That's right. Okay.
So you could do full day Thursday, the 29th, and a half day Friday, the 30th, if that works for you all, if you want to set aside that.
I'm good with that. Anybody opposed to that?
When you say
Can you
half a day on
clarify?
Friday.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, same thing. Can you clarify what time frame on Friday, the half day? Is it morning or afternoon? I think you said afternoon, or I don't know.
It's totally up to you.
If you do morning and you are at some kind of consensus to move forward, well, and Steve, you let me know. I mean, what could we do that afternoon if there was a candidate that we wanted to reach out to before the weekend just to follow up, or would you say don't do that?
I'm not sure I follow.
So sometimes when we've done the assessment centers, and sometimes when we get together, normally, as you mentioned earlier, we try to move pretty quickly once we've selected the final candidate. So I didn't know if they met that morning on Friday, April 30th. I was thinking that would give us the afternoon if there's any other phone calls that need to be made or follow up with any of the candidates, so that hopefully either before the weekend or that following week, maybe they could identify who they're moving forward with.
Again, that makes sense. Yeah.
I agree. I like that idea too of doing the morning if that works with people's schedules.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, good. Well, we have a plan, and I will. I know Mary Beth. She's already written all this down, but I'll send it to her as well, just to make sure that we're all in agreement. That's good. Do you all want to take 20 to 30 minutes and talk about what you see as the key challenges and some other questions regarding the manager position?
Sure.
I'll have to jump off at 9:30.
Okay.
Well, let's get you involved very quickly.
Thank you.
I already
Yeah,
have two
same
that
here.
have to
I
get
have
off.
a client at 9:30.
All right, we'll let Ms. Killingsworth and Mayor Pro Tem Dozier give their input first.
Okay. Well, let's do so. I'm sorry, I'm multitasking here. I'm trying to pull up we have a form we use for this. Okay, good. I'm ready. So let me start off with the question we talked about. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing the next Apex town manager? And that can be challenges is completely wide open. It can be anything internal, staff issues. It can be morale issues. It can be technology, whatever. It can be external issues, economic development, infrastructure, relationships with the community, whatever. What do you see as the key challenges that the next manager will be facing, either immediately upon taking the position, or maybe down the road the next 2 or 3 years? What do you see as those key challenges?
Oh, this is Audra. Dealing with systemic racism and social justice issues within the community, involving the community in those issues as well. Communication is a big one. I foresee, reassessing the organization as a whole, making sure that the right people are in the right positions. Those are the big ones that come to mind right off the bat.
Okay. Could I ask a little bit about some of the social justice issues you're particularly concerned about?
So, with social justice issues, meaning, a combination of making sure that our staff in our community look very similar, making sure that our community is forefront and is treated equitable across the board, and making sure that if there is mistreatment in the community, if there are concerns that come up in the community, that those concerns are taken seriously.
Right. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Okay. So building upon that is, continuing the diversity, inclusion, and belonging, the thoughtful work that we had already started. And also looking at the organizational structure as the town has grown. There's more on staff to produce, for excellent service. Should there be some restructuring around the new manager skill set and things like that? We don't have to do things because we've always done it this way, Balancing important and competing priorities. Some have budget implications and some not as much, but trying to do that, priorities of the different stakeholders. And obviously infrastructure needs and the impact that growth has on them and quality of life. And sort of what there are people who are most impacted by decisions, and there are people who feel they are most impacted by decisions, and how we honor both of all of that, and the way that a manager would lead in that moment. I guess, when there's transition like that, ensuring that that staff morale, it's already hard in a moment of a crisis to have high morale, but to continue the things that we try to do to support staff through benefits and compensation, flexibility, and so ensuring that we continue to deal with that and do that in an equitable way, because everyone cannot work from home. So continuing to figure out ways to support people in their roles and for what their needs are at home. Thank
Great.
you.
Great. Thank you. Who else would like to jump in?
I guess I could speak up, give my 2 cents on the issue. So I see, in addition to everything my colleague said, I also believe Apex is facing a lot of challenges regarding to managing our growth and how that relates to our infrastructure. And I worry we need someone who has experience in dealing with a town of our size and the town that's growing the rate that we are. We have a large CIP backlog with a lot of high dollar items that need to be somehow balanced and prioritized. And a town manager which has some experience or expertise in dealing with this and can advise us, is it super important we build that next safety station or not we do this next road project? They're going to have big consequences for the town in the coming decades. And in particular, I worry a lot on this line of thought about how we're going to manage our traffic patterns and transportation, public transportation, and things of that nature, considering the DOT projects coming up in about a decade, how that's going to impact the town of Apex and the type, again, feeding back and what type of projects that we're going to need to do to deal with that current situation and how we're going to fund them. So to me, that's one of the big challenges is finding someone who can speak on these issues, who's dealt with stuff like this before, and can deal with a town of this size.
Okay.
I think I'll go ahead and go as well. I think I'm on the growth train too, as far as the biggest challenge. I think there are some short-term and very acute things like Terry mentioned regarding infrastructure. I see it also as kind of a little bit more of a philosophical issue as well, where people are, obviously seeing all the growth and seeing the changes in their town, and also they're seeing changes happening all over the county, especially in the western part. And so helping the elected officials and the citizens with a vision about how Apex how it will look in 5 and 10 and 20 years, I think, with all this growth and with all our place in the region being, we're not moving anywhere. So our place in the region being known, I think kind of helping communicate and develop that vision would be the part of the growth thing that I would like to see in a manager. And also just the fact that the growth leads to a lot of new employees, a lot of new departments, growing departments, and how a workforce that is not stable, not the same people all the time, but is going to be increasing in size, how that can be managed as well.
Great. Okay.
And this is Cheryl. I'll just chime in. I agree with what everyone said. We are growing. We are one of the most fastest growing places in the country. So balancing all of the needs with growth and infrastructure, but also a vision of quality of life, and how do we set some boundaries, and how do we plan, and also remember quality of life for our employees as well, our staff, as we are faced with a number of challenges moving forward. And one other issue that hasn't been mentioned yet is also climate change, how we address climate change as a town. And I know we have our sustainability coordinator, but I would also like a town manager who sees the importance of that being integrated in our work as well.
Right.
All right. So it sounds like they've covered everything, but I do want to expound on it a few things. So one of the things that I think is going to be a challenge with is, they talked about social justice and what comes with that. Things are often can be safe to just keep status quo and keep doing things the same way. So the challenge will be trying to maintain some sense of tradition, but also understanding we have to be progressive in some things and change with what the citizens are demanding. So that person has to be very flexible, and that transparency has to be there so the community can effectively communicate with the town council, the staff, and everyone involved with pushing, what we need done in this town. The quality of life, as Cheryl mentioned, is very important. So people first, that has to be the focus, in my opinion. And I think that comes with a challenge with all the other demands that were mentioned with the infrastructure and transportation, as Terry pointed out. there has to be a good balance, and the person is flexible in getting that done. And I have to again say this: what Cheryl talked about was staff, being a former staff member, making sure that we develop our current staff members and put them in positions to growth opportunities, and we can only get better in that way. That's all I have.
Okay. Has everybody spoken about challenges?
This
All
is
right.
Cheryl, just to add a little more, and I think Councilmember Gant spoke on this in terms of just being a real visionary, being a real person of progress. And so obviously we're asking for everything, A to Z, I know it sounds like, but a real visionary who really, we say we're the peak of good living. So we really want a town manager who will help us live into that and grow into that. So we can really be a model example, not only in our region, but, in the nation as well. So I know it's a tall order, but a real visionary person who embraces, not only the growth, the infrastructure, the traffic, but also our commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity.
Well, you've jumped right into the next piece, which is what that whole question about key competencies. I mean, some are obvious and things that you've said already, but picking up on what Cheryl said, you want someone who's a visionary, who embraces the growth. What else? Other key competencies you're looking for?
Steve, when I was looking through your EQ or the emotional intelligence categories, the one that previously I thought was the most important, or maybe one of the most important, at least in any leader, any organization, including town manager, is the empathy one. That one I try it. That's one of my main goals, is to be as empathetic as possible, because not necessarily have sympathy for someone, but trying to understand what they're going through, and whether it's the employees, trying to, sometimes employees have a tough time at work because they are having a tough time at home or whatever. So trying to understand and get empathy was, I guess, my number one characteristic that I always look for in someone. So that one jumped out at me, especially with the town manager, with the varied responsibilities they have with citizens and employees.
Okay, good. Anybody else?
Well, it's probably a given, but obviously efficiency and organization and effective communication skills would be very key competencies. And as I think Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, with communication, we're talking internally as well as externally with the community.
I was just going to ask about that. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Anything else anyone would like to add at this point? Okay. So I don't know if you all have any particular thoughts about, let me just tell you a little bit about our thinking when we begin to put together a job ad for you all. Our mindset is always, when you're recruiting, open the door as wide as you can. And by that, I mean, don't set an artificially high requirements for the position. There may be, you may want to be very clear about your preferred expectations, but with respect to the required qualifications, if you set the bar too high, you're just going to limit the number of applications you get. Our view is always, let's see who's interested. You can always screen them out, but let's open the door as wide as you can. And that means not setting artificially high expectations. It also means putting a salary range out there that will definitely draw some interest. So I don't know if you all have any thoughts about those kinds of expectations. Here's what we normally say for a position like this. we would say at least 3 to 5 years as a department director in a large organization or as an assistant manager or manager. We would also say that a bachelor's degree is required. A master's degree would be preferred. Does any of that raise any concerns for you all, those kinds of expectations? Okay, so I assume that's everything. That sounds okay?
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay, all right. And are there any thoughts about salary range at this point, or do we have any, I don't know if Mary Beth has any information about that, or council has any thoughts about salary range? I should say hiring range that you would consider.
I don't have a specific,
I'm sorry, Mr. Happy, go ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say, I don't have a specific range in mind. I know we just recently went through our town manager evaluation. And part of that was looking at the competitive, where we are in the competitive range in the area. I certainly would be in favor of offering a competitive salary. And I mean, this is the first time I've gone through this. I'm not sure how this usually works. Is there a negotiation with the final candidate at the end that kind of determines the final package?
Yes, sir, there would be. Yeah.
Right.
And the key that I'm concerned about at this point is, what we put in the job ad to draw interest. We really believe it's important to put a salary range in, or hiring, I keep saying salary range, hiring range, so that people have a reasonable expectation.
Hey, Steve, is there a typical way that people base the hiring range versus the previous salary of the previous manager?
Yeah, I will just tell you, our experience is that, and again, I'm just telling you what our experience is. I'm not saying this is logical or anything like that. But our experience is typically that most councils are certainly willing to consider people at the current salary range of their manager, and usually even higher. That's our usual experience.
Okay, thanks.
And again, that doesn't mean you're committing to it, but let's put it this way. If you had the perfect candidate walk in the door who checked all your boxes, how much would you be willing to put out there to compensate that person?
Steve, what we might could do, I would assume that our minimum would be at least higher than the manager's direct reports. So I can that would be the minimum is, at least a little bit higher than what any of the other directors or assistant town managers make. Obviously, we've got budgeted up to what Drew is currently making, and I could talk with Sean about budget as well, how far we could go up there, and then maybe we could put that in the job, well, it will be included in the job ad, and that way then council can look at what that hiring range is when they're reviewing it with the job ad.
That works fine for us. That'd be great.
That works for everyone else. That'll just give you a starting point.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I have everything that I need from you all. Thank you. I know this has been a long session for you. But I think I have everything I need. And Mary Beth, after we wrap this up, she and I can talk about next steps for getting other input. But is there anything else that you all would like to discuss? Any questions, any concerns before Joe and I disappear?
Just a comment. Thank you for the presentation. And I think we got a lot of good work done this morning.
I concur. All right. Well,
it's a great sign to see you all working so well together and being so efficient yourselves. Any manager would want to know about that. That's great. So we're pleased.
All right.
All right. Well, Joe, anything further from you?
No, excited about working with the town of Apex. Look forward to it.
All right. Well, we'll sign off then, and thank you all so much. And you'll get the job ad from us